Yeah, when it comes to the definition of leadership, we found out that if you keep it simple, that if you use a language that people can engage with and understand, it makes the messaging actually more powerful. And we come from an environment where we first tried to be very explicit about all the different components, and sometimes we had too many details. We now have 4 leadership attributes. We describe them as growth, performance, authenticity, and collaboration. And that's a language that we try to make leaders understand, but also speak about in a language that is about themselves. So for me, these leadership attributes really are about finding a language where each individual leader makes it their own, and then people start to understand and it becomes credible. Yeah, what we learned when it comes to diversity and inclusion, which is typically framed under D&I, is that it's relatively easy, specifically if you have a strong brand, to hire diverse people. But if that diversity is not embraced, if the different skill and the different capability is not used to get to better business outcomes, you don't have the positive effect of that diversity. And that's where inclusion comes in. So what we try to do around inclusive leadership is teach, help, support, coach leaders to listen first and foremost and more intently to the people, and include literally in the decision-making process diverse thoughts and ideas in order to get to better outcomes. And it sounds simple, it's rather hard to do, and that's why we make a point out of it. When you talk about the leadership attribute of growth, I find, and we've done it in my company sometimes as well, a strong focus on pure financials, and then typically described in the financial language way. So cash flow from operations, a return on average capital employed, and even not that, typically people use the acronyms, so they go CFFO or ROAS. And the reality is that very few people are motivated, get out of bed in the morning when you describe growth only in financial terms. So my point indeed during the session was leadership capability to describe growth in a language that answers for people the question, what's in it for me? Why should I be excited? To talk about career opportunities that growth create. If you have an expansion strategy of growth, it would open up the opportunity for people to work outside their home country. If it's about size growth, it would allow the opportunity for people to deal with bigger challenges. And I think at that moment in time, people start to get excited, and you do what leaders should do, I think, and it's get people's hearts and minds to connect, and then you will get the better performance for the enterprise. So one of the things around dashboard is certainly in an environment and in the structure in which we operate, is that you very rapidly start to create behaviors around getting to green, which in a way is a desired side effect, but it has a few undesired side effects. And one of those is that people focus on the reds, so those things are not in order, and forget to challenge the greens. And sometimes you get to side effects. I mentioned the example of succession planning, which is a very common practice in human resources. And it's common practice to say that you need 3 leaders, capable people to take on any senior role. And part of talent planning gears towards getting the 3 names for these roles. And typically when you do that, then you say the traffic light is green. What we found out in practice is, because that's the way it's organized, there's typically not enough challenge on the 3 individuals. Their real capability, their real availability, there might be mobility challenges or other reasons. So when the real vacancy opens up, in many cases, you really don't have 3 candidates, but your traffic light says it's green. So my point during the session is, don't challenge the reds, because that's basically openly talking about those areas where you're lacking behind. But challenge the greens, because there might be gems there, things you can learn, and there might be undesired side effects that you would like to explore. Yeah, so if you look at job descriptions, they of course serve the purpose in our organization for many decades, in terms of providing some structure, role clarity. Sometimes the evaluation of the level of the job was related to the job description. But there were a few undesired side effects of job description, indeed, I talked about. One of the key things is that are typically not written by the person who has to do the job. They're typically written with a view of the past and not of the future. But the most important thing that I shared with the audience was that job descriptions don't take into account who you are as an individual, where your passion lies, where your skills are. And very few jobs don't have an opportunity to get to the desired endpoint in different ways. And my point is, if you make the job description your job, your role, and you put your hearts and minds around what you can achieve in that environment, in a conversation with your boss where you say, how does success look like, you will get far better outcome for the business, and you will have a higher motivated individual. And so my belief is that if you do that right, you also will have people who don't feel that they're doing a job, but they will probably be enjoying themselves because they're doing what they enjoy doing. And that, of course, for leaders is magic, and when you can achieve that. Yeah, when it comes to the topic of collaboration, it's one of those words that's quite often used, also in the context of leadership capability. And the point I tried to make in the room was that we typically focus on collaboration with people that speak a language that we speak as well. And my point is that the most difficult part of collaboration is building bridges with people that are different than you. And it builds a bit back on the topic of listening, because that's the core skill that you use when you want to collaborate with somebody who has a different driver, speaks a different language, comes from a different culture than you are. And we found out that certainly in today's world, certainly with companies expanding into other countries where you try to build bridges with other cultures, but also inside a business where, for example, you want to have a digitized strategy, and you have to build bridges with people who are good at that. So my point around collaboration is be curious about leaders' capability and proven capability to be successful with people that have very different drivers than themselves. So when it comes to the leadership attributes, let's first realize that very few leaders have perfect capability around the authenticity and collaboration, the growth and the performance. So most leaders I know, and I would include myself in that, are skewed. So they're stronger in certain attributes, weaker in others. So when it comes to putting these in practice in the real world, first of all, it's important that individual leaders, which is part of our leadership development, realize where the strengths and weaknesses relative to these 4 attributes are. And the second thing in the practical environment you do when it comes to building teams, that you compensate for the strengths and weaknesses of a leader. So if a leader is very strong when it comes to performance management, but weaker in collaboration, you want to build that capability in the team around that leader. And that way, in the practical world, you can create what we call winning teams and use your leader attributes to help build that.